The radical. Fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this Saturday, September 9th, 8 p.m. I know I changed the time a lot today. I apologize for that. Schedule's shifted. But thank you for joining me in spite of all that. I hope everybody's having so far, a fantastic weekend and looking forward to a terrific Sunday. All right, today we're going to talk about the U.S. economy more broadly. We're going to particularly talk about a Wall Street Journal article about the real estate doom loop threat and the threat that poses both banks and to the broader U.S. economy. Generally, there is a lot of talk about the U.S. being in some kind of economic doom loop. We'll talk about what doom loops are, what it means, and whether there's anything to it, whether there's anything to the panic and catastrophizing that is going on. All right, I'm again running, I guess, the same poll I ran yesterday. But slightly different times. Feel free to vote more than once. That is yesterday and today, not many times today. So focus on voting. Let me know which times work best for you. I'm shocked that so far the 12 to 2 time frame is getting most of the votes. You'd think that would be too early for most people. Particularly on the West Coast, and I'm assuming we don't have any Europeans on right now because it's very late at night. So in spite of that, 12 to 2 seems to be leading. So this is a poll to ask you, if I converted the Yaron Brook Show to a daily 2 to 3 hour show, instead of doing it every morning, short segments, and then 3 times a week, longer segments, just do 5 days a week, 2 to 3 hours, maybe the beginning of it, news, something deeper, and then Q&A. That is kind of that would be the plan. But the question is, what time of day would maximize your participation? What is the most likely time that you would participate? Is it 12 to 2? All these times in the poll are East Coast time, and they're all PM. So 12 to 2 p.m. on the East Coast. 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 3 to 5. What are the hours most likely to participate? I always think, well, nobody's going to do it these hours because they're all working. But then, people like Rush Limbaugh and Glenn Beck and those guys always had radio shows in these kind of time slots. And obviously millions and millions and millions of people listen to them. So I tend to suspect that, I don't know, maybe people are not working quite as hard and as many hours as they pretend to be, or they claim to be. So I'm not sure how that works, but right now it's a very close competition between 12 to 2 and 3 to 5. These polls are fun. We'll do more of them. If you have ideas for topics to poll, please let me know, and we'll set them up and load them. Yeah. I mean, people can still watch the show anytime. That's the thing. It really is. This poll is really for people who would watch it live, would participate live. I like the live format. I like having people on live. This is to see how many of you, those of you who watch live, how many of you would watch it in different time slots, and what's the time slot that maximizes live participation, both in terms of because I live is good because we get questions, we get a chat, and of course we get the super chat, so we get a little support for the show. So I want to see if I can maximize live viewers. Is that an atlas on the table or dictionary? You mean that very, very, very thick book on the table over there? It's neither an atlas nor a dictionary. It's this book I bought. I think I showed it on a previous show. it's basically a history of the Dutch Republic, by Jonathan Israel, who is a writer. Who's a writer who writes a lot about the Enlightenment. So I've got a few of his books, and so I bought this book but I did not expect it to be, 1,200 pages, 1,200 page book. So I don't know if I'll ever finish it, but I have every plan to read it, to read it slowly. I am very interested in the history of the Dutch Republic. It seems like there's something really important going on there in the 15th, 16th, 17th, and 18th centuries, and that really sets up both the Enlightenment and the Industrial Revolution. There's real wealth creation going on very early, much earlier than the rest of Europe, and I'm interested in why that is and what was going on in Holland and the Netherlands generally to stimulate such a vibrant economy, such a vibrant culture. Think about the paintings but the wealth, such a trading mentality, and also a lot of thinkers that, in many ways, kind of set us up for the Enlightenment. People who were talking about rights well before even before John Locke. So anyway, an interesting period in history that I'm interested in. I would have got it on audio and listened to the book, but it doesn't exist on audio. It doesn't exist on Kindle. It's basically, this is the format. New, it's $75, so I got it used for like 20 something. It's not in good shape, but that's fine. It's good in good enough shape. All right. Let's see, what else? Remind everybody to use the Super Chat to ask questions. That's incredibly valuable in these shows because you get to steer the direction of the show and where we go and how we do it. So please use the Super Chat to ask questions. We really should be getting to our dollar goals in terms of these shows. So please consider doing $20 questions rather than asking lots and lots of $2 and $5 questions that don't really get us very close to the goal, even though they produce lots of questions. All right, let's jump in with the topic today. I'll just remind everybody there's a poll at the top of the chat. Those of you who are listening live can participate. Those of you who are not listening live cannot. So it's just for people live on YouTube. Right now, the 3 to 5 just took the lead. Is now the favored time. Not a great time slot for me, 3 to 5. So for a variety of reasons, that's not my preferred time slot. But let's see what happens during the rest of the show. Only 39 people have voted. We've got over 60 people online right now. Be great if you voted, so we just get a sense of what our live listeners would prefer if we made that change. I'm not sure I'm going to make that change, but if I made the change, it looks like either early or late, but kind of 1 to 4 is not ideal. All right, or 1 to 3 is not ideal. Let's jump in. So the Wall Street Journal 3 days ago ran a story titled "Real Estate Doom Loop Threatens America's Banks," with the direct implication that this is more than just the banks. Of course, if it's threatened the banks, that's a potential for financial crisis. The potential for financial crisis is a potential for an economic crisis, which is a potential for a recession and real economic problems for the United States. All as a consequence of what the Wall Street Journal is calling this commercial real estate doom loop, that banks are engaged in. So I want to talk today about what a doom loop is, how people describe it as functioning, and then we can talk about the article itself, the relationship between commercial real estate banks, and then we can expand from this to say, okay, what is this going to happen? What is the likelihood, or what do we think the likelihood is here? And then what implications does that have to the economy? And what are the real threats to the U.S. economy? How healthy or how unhealthy is the U.S. economy at this time? All of the times in the poll are East Coast time. Sorry, I didn't include it in the poll. Yeah, I should have put it in parentheses, but all the times are East Coast time. So I want to talk about all of that. I also want to mention that Ben Shapiro did a segment 2 days ago, 2 days ago, on the real estate doom loop. So you can find that on the Ben Shapiro show if you search Ben Shapiro. Indeed he covers a lot of different news items, but this was the first, and I think the title of the video is this, right? Real estate doom loop, economic doom loop. Are we heading towards Armageddon? And I found his analysis. How should I put it? Interesting. His analysis interesting in one particular way. And we will talk about that as well. And in particular, I mean, Ben Shapiro kind of says throughout, this is the consequence of the Biden economy. This is the Biden economy. This is the fragility of the Biden economy. This is the doom loop of the Biden economy. And so what I found interesting about it, I'll just say this now, and maybe we can return to this, is that when you listen to commentaries, and look, Ben Shapiro has 6.7 million subscribers, so a lot of people are listening to these shows. But what you hear when you listen to his economic analysis is basically partisan politics. It reminds me a lot of Rush Limbaugh used to do this a lot. The whole analysis was partisan, right? The economy was going to hell and collapsing and a disaster and doom loop and awful and horrible when Democrats were in power. And the economy was doing quite well, and people didn't appreciate how well the economy was doing and how robust the U.S. economy was when the Republican was in power. And it didn't matter what the reality was. It didn't matter what was actually going on in the real world. It didn't matter what the data actually presented or what was actually happening. All that it mattered was the fact that a Democrat was in the House, it was in power, or a Republican was in power. And so when you listen to economic analysis out there from partisan people, MSNBC, Fox, Ben Shapiro, or the equivalent on the left, and Noah Smith, who is an economist who I follow on Substack, is the same way on the left. Like right now, the U.S. economy is booming. It's unbelievable. It's so great. The Biden, and he calls it the Biden economy and Biden economic policy. It's all success. It's all rosy. It's all beautiful. It's all amazing. And it really is a challenge unless you look for real economic analysis. It really is a challenge to figure out what's actually going on. What is really going on? What is happening? What is good? What is bad? And then the other aspect of this that I think is really important is who's responsible? So let's say, we're heading towards some kind of catastrophe right now, and we're going to go into a deep recession, which is certainly possible, but who's responsible? Is it Biden's fault? Is that how it works? And when the economy did really well, let's say during the 1990s, was that Clinton's fault? Was it the economy in the 2000s Bush's and Obama? I mean, we attribute success and failure to our political leaders in ways that they simply do not deserve, plus or minus. Now, you can often attribute particular outcomes to particular policies. I don't know, was the financial crisis really a Bush crisis? To some extent, certainly some economic challenges, or some causes of the great financial crisis in 2008 were caused by specific Bush policies. But they were also caused by policies going back to the Great Depression, to FDR, regulatory institutions, for example. They were also caused by, to a large extent, by the policies of Ben Bernanke as Federal Reserve Chairman. They were caused by the whole mentality of Alan Greenspan as Federal Reserve Chairman even before that. And they were caused by certain regulatory things that Bill Clinton had done during the 1990s. And you could even take it back to things that Congress did in 1980, and it all came together in this crazy storm during 2008. And it's quick and easy to blame whoever happens to be in the White House at the time. It's their fault. But it doesn't. Life, reality, and economics certainly don't quite work that way. Like inflation. Is inflation really Biden's fault? Well, to some extent, sure. He spent a lot of money in 2021, and he spent, and after the big stimuli of COVID, they continued to spend money, of course, bipartisan to some extent. Republicans voted for it, whether it was the Inflation Reduction Act, what a joke, and then or the CHIP Act, or numerous other things. They spend money like there's no tomorrow. That's all true. But isn't this inflation really, if you really want to attribute the entire what's going on in the economy and the inflation, isn't it to some extent caused by the quantitative easing that happened during the entire 2010s, that is after the financial crisis? Isn't it to some extent a consequence of Trump's stimulus of the economy during 2020 as a result of COVID? You can't just attribute the inflation to Biden's stimulus if Trump's was just as big, if not bigger, the year before. That's got to have played a role as well. And of course, what about the fact that under Trump, spending as a percentage of GDP, government spending as a percentage of GDP, continued to increase dramatically from 2016 to 2019? Has that got anything to do with inflation? Well, of course it does. And you can't understand this doom loop that the Wall Street Journal is talking about. And you can't understand the zombie companies, and you can't understand the susceptibility of the U.S. economy today to crisis without understanding inflation and therefore the Fed's response to inflation by raising interest rates. But is that the right response to inflation? Is that what's decreasing inflation right now? Is it the Fed raising interest rates? Is that what decreases inflation? Or is inflation coming down anyway because there was a one-time shock to the money supply? It increased dramatically during COVID. Prices had to adjust to reflect the increased money in the economy. They adjust upwards. Once that they've adjusted and you're not continuously flooding the market with new money, inflation should just dissipate. Maybe inflation would have gone away no matter what the Fed had done. Maybe not. Maybe what the markets are really looking at with inflation is government spending and government deficits. I mean, these are complex issues. And yet, almost all the commentary out there tries to boil these complex issues down to partisan politics. And I'm just saying, beware. Even if it's somebody as smart as a Ben Shapiro has become more and more, sadly, more and more partisan. Of course, being more and more partisan has led to him growing bigger and bigger and bigger, more and more successful. So maybe we should all be more partisan, because maybe that is the source of real success in this business. But the reality is that if you're interested in economic analysis, beware. There is one other form of economic analysis that you have to be careful of out there, which often sounds much more reasonable and rational and is not nonpartisan. And that is the economic policy that always sees doom and gloom around the corner, that is constantly seeing the next crash and collapse and disaster just around the corner. I mean, probably the best example of that is Nouriel Roubini, who is a well-known bear who is, often declared the end and the decline of the U.S. economy, the end of the stock market bull, the next doom loop, the next disaster. And Nouriel Roubini, of course, is well known because he was one of the people who predicted the 2008 great financial crisis. And really, that's how it works, right? If you predict crisis every year, sometimes you're going to be right. And when you are right, you're considered a guru, a hero, a prophet, somebody who can see the future. And therefore everybody starts following you, and you continue to predict doom and gloom. Some people drop off when they realize it's not happening, but you're always going to have a core people who are going to stick with you no matter what, because doom and gloom sells. Catastrophizing sells. So just in this context, in March 30th of 2023, this year, March 30th, Nouriel Roubini put out an article. The title of the article was "The Coming Doom Loop." The Coming Doom Loop. And of course, the Wall Street Journal article is titled "Real Estate Doom Loop Threatens America's Banks." And again, just to give you some context about this, a little bit of historical context, even about this use of the term, of this idea of doom loop. I did a search, doom loop Wall Street Journal, and it's interesting what comes up. Well, first, and we'll talk about this. We've got the San Francisco doom loop, which I've talked about, and we can talk about that as well. But 2022 last year. This is a Wall Street Journal title. Doom loop fears are putting Italian banks to the test. Italian banks are still around and okay, last time I looked. This is 2020, December 30th, 2020. So right at the end of 2020, but midst of COVID. Wall Street Journal title, banks pile into government debt, setting up, guess what it's setting up? A doom loop. Another title, another one in 2022, doom loop fears haunt Italian banks. This is 2018, right? 2018. So this is 4 years before the doom loop haunts Italian banks. In 2018, October 2018, investors fear Italian doom loop as bond sell-off deepens. So the Italian doom loop has been going on for a while. Yet Italy still stands. Or again, in 2018, May of 2018, Wall Street Journal, bank investors fear return of European doom loop. 2019, Italy's doom loop imagined and real, right? At least they recognize there might be an imagined section of it. And then just so you don't think this is just about Italy and Europe, in February 11th of 2016, the Wall Street Journal had a title, an article titled, "Doom Loop Fears Cast Pale Over Bank Shares." So as far back as 2016, people viewed American banks as entering a doom loop. And, 2013, Europe's bank government doom loop still holds. Again, 2016, why smaller banks pay price for Europe's doom loop. I don't know if we can go much further than that. The term was coined in 2001. So my guess is that if I went back far enough, I would find, lots of references to doom loop. And that's just, what I just gave you is just the Wall Street Journal. If you do a generalized search on doom loop, you get all kinds of stuff going back to all kinds of years from all kinds of newspaper sources. So generally, doom loop sells papers, is what or sells media, or sells clicks, or is clickbait. We'll see if having doom loop in the title of this talk today, the show will increase viewership. I don't know. Hard to tell. All right. Even The Economist, June 22nd, 2022. What is the doom loop in the Eurozone? It's literally everywhere. All right. So what is a doom loop? Doom loop basically is the idea that something, collapses, or something something defaults, something goes bad. And there are consequences to other parties in the economy. So, for example, in the case of what the Wall Street Journal is reporting about the doom loop that is threatening banks today, commercial real estate. Well, we know commercial real estate, primarily office buildings, and what I find interesting is they're not really, in the journal, they don't really differentiate between commercial real estate generally and office buildings, which they should, but it's hard to get data on it. But the reality is office buildings, particularly in the major cities, San Francisco, New York, Chicago probably, and many other cities, maybe many other cities, there is very high vacancies, very high vacancies. On a national basis, vacancies, I think I saw in office buildings are somewhere around 18%. In San Francisco and New York, it's significantly higher than that. Other places is obviously lower than that. That is the average. Now, what happens when you have vacancies? So it all starts with people working at home. People working at home not going into the office. Companies, as a consequence, realize that they don't need so much office space. So they don't renew their leases, or they shrink the size of their office space, and they let the people work from home. Maybe they rotate people from home. Maybe they only have people coming in from work to work 3 days a week. But what that generates is less use of office space, less need for office space. So you get vacancies. And you get now office space sitting there, and building owners trying to rent it out. But a lot of companies are going virtual. A lot of companies don't want office space. They don't want the rent. They would rather have their employees work virtually, and employees would rather work from home. So therefore, new companies are not buying or renting this office space. So now what's happening is building owners have their income slowly ratchet down as these leases come due and they're not being renewed. So that's the beginning. That's the initiator of the doom loop is work from home, less office space needed, people not renewing their leases, income for owners of office buildings going down. Now, almost all office buildings are purchased or built with mortgages, with basically like you buy a home with a mortgage. Almost all residential homes in the United States have mortgages. So it makes a lot of sense for a variety of reasons, which we can talk about if you want. You can ask about it, to use debt in order to finance a real estate acquisition. And so a lot of banks and private lenders and all kinds of other lenders have lent money to real estate developers, real estate owners to build or to buy office buildings. They lease them out, and then they use the rent to pay off the mortgage, and what's left is their profit. Now, what happens is as vacancy rates increase, as fewer and fewer and fewer people are leasing in your building, your income is declining and declining and declining. And at some point, that income is going to go below your mortgage. That is, you'll owe more money on a monthly basis to pay back your mortgage than you're getting in rents. And now you're in a real cash flow challenge. And one option you might have is you might say, okay, I'll sell the building. I want to get out of this. This is eating me alive. I want to get out. I want to sell. I'll do something else with my money. But, if you bought the building based on a certain assumption of rents, of income, of vacancies, and now vacancies have gone up, rental income has come down, the value of the building is significantly lower. That's one factor. The second factor is, and I've said this to you guys many times, but it's worth emphasizing, as interest rates go up, all values of all assets go down. Everything else held constant, it goes down. Because whatever you expect your income to be in the future is now discounted into the present at a higher interest rate, which makes it worth less. So the value of the building has gone down. The income of the rents has gone down. Your mortgage payments have not changed at all. And if you want to refinance your mortgage, interest rates are going to be higher. Your monthly payments will be higher. If your mortgage comes due and you have to pay it off, well, usually what happens is you do that by refinancing, but you can't afford to refinance. The valuation is much lower. So you can see how a lot of owners of office buildings are either selling their office buildings at huge losses, or they're basically just defaulting on their mortgages. They're basically handing the keys of the building to the bank. We saw a number of examples of this in San Francisco. And one dramatic example of this in San Francisco was the very large, what used to be pretty dominant hotel, the Hilton, right near Union Square. Basically, not enough people were coming, they couldn't rent the rooms out at rates that could bring enough income to pay off the mortgage. So the owner of the Hilton Hotel in San Francisco, this hotel used to be one of the places to have conferences. It's a massive hotel. It was always booked solid. It generated real high rates. Couldn't pay the mortgage anymore. He handed the keys to the bank. Now, banks often give a mortgage, like when you get a mortgage on your home, you usually have to put 20% down. On commercial real estate, office buildings and things like that, it's usually 60%, could be 50%, could be 40%. So the bank has some margin to play with. The building might have been worth $10 million, and it got a mortgage for $5 million. So as long as it hasn't dropped below the $5 million mark, it can still be sold. But part of the problem is some of these buildings are dropping dramatically in valuation, and therefore banks are going to take a hit. So the doom loop here is, again, work from home, higher vacancies, lower rents, owners defaulting on their mortgages, banks stuck with office space, office buildings that they have to sell at a loss, banks taking a loss, which they can't afford because, we saw earlier this year, deposits were flowing out of the banks and the banks having a hard time with this. And then, of course, banks start getting into trouble. Banks taking a loss means banks are less likely to lend money to new borrowers, which means people trying to refinance buildings that might still have enough vacancy there that they're thinking, okay, I can still keep it going, but they need to refinance their mortgage, go to the bank to ask for a new mortgage. Banks say, oh, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're taking losses in our current portfolio, so we're not doing any more real estate lending. So more defaults because they can't finance in order to get a new mortgage. So more defaults mean more losses, and that's the spiral. And of course, if banks go down, they stop lending to small businesses, to medium-sized businesses, to large businesses. Those businesses now can't afford to grow, but they might even have to shrink because now they can't afford to pay whatever debts they have. The banks won't lend them any money to pay off other debts. They start shutting down, they lay off people, and you see how this spirals. This is the doom loop. It loops into a recession. And of course, the only way we are told to get out of a doom loop is the government steps in and bails somebody out, bails out the businesses or bails out the banks. But somebody gets bailed out to renew the lending, right? The economy is driven by, again, according to this idea, the economy is driven by lending, and therefore what we need to do is pour money into the banking system or bail out all the businesses so that banks are confident again to lend money, and then the opposite of the doom loop happens. The virtuous loop happens, and everything grows and everything sustains. And that's what they're saying is going to happen or likely to happen, and they give some examples, and they lump all commercial banks together, and they do argue that regional and local banks have seen their commercial real estate portfolios increase dramatically. But again, there are all kinds of commercial real estate. There's commercial real estate that is office buildings. There's commercial real estate that is retail buildings, malls, strip malls, standalone stores, Starbucks. Those are all commercial real estate. And yet, it's not clear that what's happening in the office building is necessarily going to happen to strip malls. That could be true in San Francisco. And again, this is why you have to look at the details. In San Francisco, it might be true because people are not coming to work in the downtown. Stores are closing in the downtown. But those stores are probably opening up somewhere else. Commercial real estate is also manufacturing plants, small, medium, large manufacturing plants. It's also, warehouses. It's lots of things. Commercial real estate is a big category. The one area of commercial real estate that's really struggling right now, more than any other, is office buildings. I mean, I don't know that, shopping is struggling that much. Consumers still seem to be spending. And while it's true that e-commerce, that Amazon has hurt brick and mortar shopping, it hasn't created a disaster. I mean, it's not like the malls are completely closed. They've revamped, they've changed, there are fewer malls and they're different, but you still have strip malls. You still have lots of shopping that gets done physically, not just virtually. And the doom loop that everybody thought would happen because of Amazon, because of e-retail, never happened. And I suspect, now I don't know because the office building doom loop could indeed happen. I suspect that we're not entering a doom loop in office real estate either. Office real estate vacancies are very high in certain places. Certainly San Francisco is in a doom loop. Although even in San Francisco, I suspect that there are people right now eyeing San Francisco real estate and saying, might be a great buying opportunity. This city might actually come back. And there are two reasons, at least, that I can think of why San Francisco will, at some point, likely come back. One, it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world. Top three beautiful cities in the world. It's a fun city, it's an interesting city, and it's an unbelievably beautiful city. People will want to live in San Francisco. Now, there are problems like shoplifting being legal, like homelessness in downtown being legal, that have to be solved. But they will be solved. In one way or another, they will be solved. People will want to come back to San Francisco. And second, there's just an enormous amount of talent in San Francisco. You can make fun of San Francisco all you like. You can focus on the homeless problem, on the shoplifting problem, and it could be that certain parts of San Francisco never come back, although never, of course, is a very long time. But the reality is that South of Market is a beautiful, thriving, dynamic place, and the amount of talent per square mile in parts of San Francisco is probably unmatched anywhere in the world in terms of wealth-creating talent, entrepreneurial talent, AI talent, programming talent. It's there. And it will, that kind of talent just doesn't disappear all at once. It's going to fight for San Francisco. But yeah, San Francisco right now is in a doom loop caused by the vacancies that we talked about, and the vacancies cause, shops to close because nobody's coming to the downtown, so nobody's shopping. So shops are closed and restaurants are closing. And then the people who work at the shops and restaurants don't have jobs. And, maybe they're moving to the suburbs and maybe those shops are out in the suburbs. But the fact is that downtown San Francisco becomes, people are not there. As a consequence of they're not there, people notice the homeless people less. So there's less pressure to do anything about homeless people. So more and more homeless people show up and they dominate more and more of the streets. And of course, the shoplifting situation causes major stores to shut down, as they have all around Union Square in San Francisco. And it becomes dirty and filthy, and no stores and no shops and no restaurants. And because of that, businesses say, I don't think our employees are ever going to come back. Even if we force them to come back, they don't want to come back to San Francisco, so maybe we should move somewhere else. And you get this self-reinforcing doom loop. Now, I suspect that what's going to happen is that some smart people are going to buy a bunch of San Francisco real estate for cheap. They're going to go to City Hall, and they're going to find a way to line the pockets of the right people in City Hall to change their policies with regard to homeless people and with regard to shoplifting. As a consequence of them, they'll have a huge economic interest to clean up San Francisco. Because if San Francisco's cleaned up, the value of the commercial real estate that they bought at really, really cheap prices will skyrocket. And you get the opposite of a doom loop, a virtuous loop, right? And as people come back, they came out of homeless people, they lobby more, they become more aggressive, stores will come back, they'll vote out the district attorney, they'll bring a district attorney in who is gonna, and San Francisco won't suddenly become some a Republican conservative bastion, but it will at least be a more level-headed place as it was maybe 10 years ago. Even then, it had a homeless problem, but nothing like what's going on today, which is just disgusting. You do not want to go to certain places in San Francisco today. So San Francisco is definitely in a doom loop right now, which I think will be reversed ultimately. But it's definitely in a doom loop right now. And again, I think there's a lot of smart money eyeing how to get out of this doom loop. But the U.S. economy, and you could argue New York is in a bit of a doom loop, but it doesn't look like it. A lot of people are moving back to New York. Violent crime rates in New York are very low. The New York area broadly is one of the least violent places in the United States. It's significantly less violent than than most of the South, for example, and certainly much of the Appalachia area in the country, and much of the rest of the country. It's one of the safest parts of the country is the area around New York, including New York City itself. We just have no, we think New York, violence, murders in the streets, just not happening. All you have to do is look at the numbers, right? Actual numbers rather than impression and fear. So New York really has a problem because of because of the work from home. Although a lot of businesses are encouraging their employees to indeed come back and to come back to the office, but Midtown and other places. So what you're seeing is office buildings will be converted to condos because rents right now are very high in New York. So there is a real opportunity to rent out places, to turn them into condos and to rent them out. I'm seeing a lot of hotels that I used to stay at along Lexington Avenue, Midtown, where office vacancies are really being hurt. I see a lot of those hotels are renovating. It's not clear if they're renovating to become condos or they're renovating to become different hotels. But a lot of renovation is going on there to change things, to make it more profitable. It's not clear that all of those are going to go bust, that all of them are going to go bankrupt, that there's no upside. Again, my guess is that they're investors looking for deals, looking for opportunities to buy this real estate. Other places in other parts of the country, office vacancies are nowhere near as bad as they are in San Francisco and maybe in Chicago. My sense is that vacancies in places like Dallas and Austin, maybe Phoenix and in Denver are nowhere near as high and nowhere near as problematic. So I'm skeptical about the doomsayers in terms of banks collapsing and because of this doom loop associated with commercial real estate. I think they're measuring commercial real estate wrong. They're not measuring it right. And I think they are not, they're aggregating office buildings with a lot of other types of commercial real estate that are not hurting. You know, multifamily residential, there's a boom right now in multifamily residential construction. Also, there's a big difference between construction loans, which are always riskier, and actual, mortgages. There are a lot of nuances to these loans. And I think that just like all the other articles that have doom loop in the title, whether this comes true or not is questionable. If I had to think about something in the U.S. economy that is worrisome, I think there are lots of places to look. And certainly this is one of them. It's not that this should be dismissed. It's something to consider. It's something to evaluate. It's something to study and figure out. But there's so many problems in the U.S. economy. Why focus here? I mean, maybe the biggest problem is government spending, government deficits, government debt that is through the roof. As we said, this year that ends at the end of September is looking at a $2 trillion government deficit, double what it was last year, double what it was in 2019, which was already a high year, and getting to the levels of 2020 and 2021 when we had all the COVID stimulus. If you want to look at distortions and problems in the economy, one should look at all the malinvestment that is being produced by Biden economics, the Inflation Reinvestment Act, the CHIP Act, and a bunch of that. We're building a lot of manufacturing plants. There's a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of resources going into building manufacturing plants. Are they ever going to be viable? Are they ever going to be profitable? Are they ever going to be able to stand on their own 2 feet without government subsidies? If you're worried about something, look at all the malinvestment going into so-called clean energy. If you're worried, I would worry about private equity funds that rely on cheap debt to buy companies, and they are going to have to refinance. So there's a lot in the economy, there's a lot of economic activity today that is still kind of running on the energy in the form of loans from the zero interest rate environment of the last decade, pre-inflation. That will run out at some point. What happens then? The fact that China is in real economic crisis is going to have an impact on America. It's going to have an impact on the world. The fact that Europe, particularly Germany, is in economic crisis. And the fact that there's a war in Ukraine. All of these things are things to worry about, to be concerned about, and to really think through in terms of challenges. And would I be surprised if we had a recession next few months? No. But of course, I am the least, I hope I'm one of the least catastrophizers out there. And yet I've been expecting a recession for the last year, any month now. And it hasn't happened because of the incredible resilience and flexibility of the U.S. economy, and maybe because the U.S. economy right now is artificially being boosted with government spending, which ultimately will have to be paid for one way or the other. But ultimately is when. So my point here is not that we're not going to have a recession, not that we are going to have a recession, but more to say, and this is why, if I came out strongly for a recession, I'd have a lot more followers. But it's to say that economics is hard. Economic prediction is hard. Figuring out all these variables and what impact they have is difficult. I expect low, slow, cumbersome economic growth over the next decade. I just think that the manifestation of all the distortions and the perversions that are caused by regulations and government spending is going to generate below 2% growth, mild, including recessions, probably on the milder side, and just stagnation rather than falling off a cliff. Now, one day we might fall off a cliff. I just don't think it's happening anytime soon. Is inflation going to go up, or is it going to stay where it is? I suspect that inflation is going to stay elevated for a while. I don't think the Fed's increasing interest rates is the real cure for inflation. I think a real cure for inflation will actually be what I've said this for a long time. I said the Republicans will ultimately try to put a brake on Biden's spending. And maybe that brake will come this fall when they shut down the government over something, who knows what. And maybe that'll serve as some kind of brake on spending. And maybe that brake on spending will ultimately result in slower inflation. But again, there are a lot of moving parts. Right now, M2, which is a measure of the money supply, has been really going down dramatically. So you'd expect inflation to actually come down. And maybe the collapse in money supply is going to cause a recession. But this is a real challenging time. It's very difficult to predict with any kind of accuracy what's going to happen. And if I could predict these things, I would be a billionaire. I mean, anybody who claims to be able to predict macroeconomic movements and is not a billionaire, something's wrong with them. Because if you can time the market in any kind of sense, if you can be right, even, if you can be right over 50% of the time, if you can be right 70% of the time, you should be a billionaire. And by the way, George Soros is a billionaire because he was right about these kind of things much more often than he was wrong, particularly around valuations of currencies. That's how he made his fortune. So some people have a proven track record of being right about these things. And it's funny because George Soros is our enemy ideologically, but he's really, really good at the macroeconomic stuff, being tell how economies are going to do over the long run and how they're going to be impacted. All right. Let's see. So eager to get questions from you guys that relates to what we talked about or anything else for that matter, or economics generally, or finance or investment or things like that. People always ask me for these kind of, now's the time to ask questions about it. We are, again, nowhere near reaching our target for one of these full shows, which is $650. So consider using this opportunity to support the show and to ask a question, or just to support the show, like John did with a sticker, and Stephen did. Thank you, Stephen. Yeah. All right, those are the stickers, and then we've got a few questions. And John did $100 for what he owes me for the music album review. So thank you, John. And thanks for the $100. So yes, ask questions about pretty much any topic you would like. But this is a good time to ask about economics. Let me also just mention, just in case some of you have joined, that we do have a poll going. The poll is about if I switched to a every day, one show, 2 to 3 hours long, what would be the best time slot to do it in so that you would watch it live, right? You would watch it live. And I'm trying to clear out my evenings and not doing the evening. Now, I don't know that I'm going to make this change. It might not make sense. And most of you want the 3 to 5 time, and that's probably the least convenient for me. But I am curious, what is the best time slot for you, right? Is it 12 to 2, 1 to 3, 2 to 4, 3 to 5? Don't worry about what's convenient for me. Tell me what's convenient for you. At this point, that's what the poll is about. So please participate in the poll. We've got 79 votes, but we've had probably a couple of hundred people already coming in and out of the show and listening. And I am really curious and to try to get as many people voting as possible, so we get as much feedback as we can, so that I can make an educated decision. All right, let's jump in with some of the questions, and remember to use this opportunity to ask a question. We got about 80 people listening. $5 from each of you, and we're almost at the target. That wouldn't be huge, and that's not, and view it as a value for value. For you, obviously watching the show, you're getting some value out of it. All right, let's see. Andrew says thoughts. Let me wait a minute, Andrew. I'm gonna go to ones that are related. Stephen, thank you. I appreciate the support. Thanks, Stephen. $20. Ori says, is there historical precedent for the stock market moves over the last 3 years? Insane high followed by steep fall and then a near complete recovery. Seems like falls that happen after insane highs usually last longer. Not necessarily. I think if you go back in the 1970s, you'll see a lot of this as uncertainty about inflation, uncertainty about interest rates manifests itself. You see this really intense volatility. I don't have. I mean, I could look at the. You could look at the chart of the S&P 500. I mean, I'm sure you could just look it up, and you would probably see how volatile it has been, over the last, forever, right? Sharp declines. Think about the decline in 1987, right? When was it 1987? Black Monday, where the stock market literally went down 25% in one day. It went up, it crashed, it slowly went back up. It took a while, it made it back up. I think you see a lot of volatility, but the volatility, the really extremes of volatility, I think, are during periods of great uncertainty. So you saw that during COVID, the big crash in March, and then the rapid recovery as money was just dumped into the marketplace by the government. You saw it. You saw the peak in early 2022, and then really coming down throughout 2022, and then this year a steep rise. But most of that is driven by changing expectations with regard to inflation, to interest rates, and to government stimuli, government spending, government money. So, is it unusual? Well, it's not normal to have such volatility, but it's not unthinkable given the levels of uncertainty that exists. And it would be good to see the 1970s. I don't have it here, or at least I'd have to go in and look at it more carefully. But if I could pull up the 1970s, my guess would be that during the 1970s you saw similar volatility because you had similar uncertainty with regard to inflation and interest rates. But one other thing I think is worth considering. Let's see if I can. No, this won't go back to the 1970s. Oh, yeah, yes, it will. Let's see. So I'm looking at a graph of S&P 500. Yeah, I mean, look at the 1970s. It's pretty astounding, right? In 1970, in 68, the S&P 500 is at 107, 108. By 70, it's at 73, so it's dropped 30% over those 2 years. It then spikes up to what was then an all-time high in 73 of 119, and then it drops dramatically to 62, right? In 1974, and then it spikes up by 1976 to 107, and that's the pattern during this period, right? And that is because of inflation. That's because of inflation, because of interest rates uncertainty, and because of volatility that generated. The same thing happens in the early 1980s. The stock market peaks in 1980, in the end of the 1980 at 140, and then by 1982, by mid-1982, it's at 100 and it's at about 100, right? It's 103, and from that point on, at 103, it just goes on a tear from 103 to 244 by 87, and then beyond that with very little volatility. What's unusual, I think, is these periods where the stock market just goes up and there's very little volatility involved. But yes, I think the 1970s saw very similar stock market movements as we've seen in the last few years in the U.S. All right. Andrew, thoughts on introspection. One must not just ask oneself, what do I feel, but also why and am I correct? Also, if one's conclusions are vastly negative, one should ask if one is omitting positives, thus distorting context. I mean, look, there's a lot that goes into introspection. There's a lot of questions one must ask. There's a lot of thinking one has to do. I think it's a mistake to try to boil them down to just a few questions. And the best source on this is probably Jean Maroney and the work she's done on introspection. I'll have her on the show in the next few weeks, months. So she'll be on and you can ask more questions regarding introspection. But you have to ask, what do I feel? You have to ask, why do I feel it? What values at play? What values are relevant to the emotional response that I'm having? Is the emotional response appropriate? It's not, is it right, or is it right or wrong, or negative or positive? But is it appropriate? Is it consistent with my explicit values? And if not, why do I think I'm responding in a way that's inconsistent with my explicit values? And try to understand what is going on. What are the values that are distorting, that are causing this angst, this conflict between explicit values and your emotions potentially? When are they aligned? How aligned are they? How confident you are that they're truly aligned? And making sure that you're not being rationalizing when you're doing all this. Make sure that you're not evading when you're doing all this, which is hard when you're introspecting. Make sure that you're looking, that you're engaging in the activity completely honestly and completely forthright with yourself. Remember, the most important person to be honest with is you. So all of that is part of the process. Oh God. All right. How can you even feign common ground with Yoram Hazony when MO, what's MO, seems to be always trying to prove to progressives that you're not conservative? My MO is not trying to prove to progressives I'm not a conservative. My MO is trying to differentiate objectivism from both progressives and conservatives, trying to sharpen our understanding of what objectivism is and what it stands for, in contrast to conservatives and in contrast to progressives, in contrast to the left and in contrast to the right. So this idea that I care what progressives think, that I'm trying to prove to progressives that objectivism is not conservatism, is just not true. Now, I want to show everybody it's important that we know that objectivists are not conservative. Everybody knows we're not progressives, but it's important that they know we're not. But it's not that I'm trying to prove it to progressives. It's not like I think that far left is going to become objectivist if only they understand we're not conservatives. I want to sharpen our understanding what objectivism is by going after conservatives. And my problem is that a lot of people who are friendly to objectivists, some people who consider themselves objectivists, think that we're conservatives, or think that we share common ground with conservatives, or have a common purpose with conservatives. Now, given that, I have no idea why you think I feign common ground with Yoram Hazony. I don't. Quite the opposite. I've debated him, and debated him in opposition to his views. I was on Lex Friedman arguing that his views are wrong, that they're bad, that they're immoral, that they're impractical. I have no interest in feigning common ground with Hazony. I have every interest in debating him and disagreeing with him and showing the world and showing people what objectivism actually stands for, what objectivism actually represents, and why it's different than everything out there. It's not progressive, it's not conservative, it's not liberal, it's not right, it's not left. It's objectivism, it's something different. It's individualism and capitalism and egoism and reason. And that's not like anything else. So I'm curious where this question is coming from. Where in everything that I've done to date have I feigned common ground with Yoram Hazony? I'm not sure where that's coming from. Michael says we might be too rich to collapse anytime soon. Well, I think we're too rich to collapse, but we're not too rich to be in a recession or to be in a deep recession. We're not too rich to slow down. We're not too rich to become less rich. I think we're too rich to collapse, but probably not too rich to become less rich. Charlie, thank you. Really appreciate the $20. We're still way off the target. I'm not sure what's going on. Last couple of shows being difficult. Last couple of shows in the evening have been difficult. The news roundup shows seem to be clicking in terms of financial support. Maybe I should just be doing those shows. Maybe these deeper shows are less interesting. Michael says, is it actually true China has zero welfare state? No, it's not true that it has zero welfare state, but it has a much smaller welfare state than the United States. It has less redistribution of wealth. It has, in many ways, a more private healthcare sector than the U.S. It doesn't have the same kind of welfare, food stamps, all of that. It has some, but it's a lot less than it has in the West. And the main reason for that is that they're poor. They can't really afford it. Redistribute from some to some when the people you're redistributing from. The whole point is redistribution of wealth is a feature of wealth. You need to be rich to do that. People won't tolerate it if you have high tax rates on lower middle class people, the equivalent of lower middle class people. The only people who tolerate high taxes are the rich because they feel guilty for that richness. And they do okay, even with the taxes. James says, does anyone still have the power to live well in this dying world? Yeah. I mean, I live well. I mean, I don't know what it means to have the power to live well. There's so many opportunities in this world. There's so many things you can do. There's so many people getting rich and wealthy, and not because they're cronies, not because they're sucking at the tit of government, not because they're getting subsidies. And yet, if you're an AI entrepreneur right now, you're doing very, very well. But there are a lot of people doing well. If you look at, the movement of middle class people into what's called upper middle class or the rich, it's robust. It's robust. There are a lot of people in this world right now doing very, very well economically. And I don't know why you would think that that's not happening. And the economy is doing fine for most people. And the pessimism, beware that the pessimism doesn't inhibit you from realizing your potential and from living well. All right. Let's see. All right, this is the last question we have. So if anybody wants to jump in with a question or just do a sticker to support the show, trade value for value, now's the time to do it because this is the last question. Don't know how long it'll take me to answer it. Do objectivists find beauty in the natural world? Don't take that as an endorsement of naturalistic art. I am a romantic, but in the real natural world. Well, I don't know about objectivists, but I certainly do. There's lots of opportunities in ways in which there are lots of, sorry, I'm thinking of the last question, but yeah, I mean, there's immense beauty in the natural world. I love the fact that I live right on the ocean, and I look out my windows and I see the Atlantic Ocean and the waves, and I love watching the storm clouds roll in, and I find it dramatic and quite beautiful. I think I particularly enjoy it because it gives me this sense of command over nature, in a sense, right? Because I'm in the comfort of my home with the air conditioning blasting, staying cool and dry while maybe a storm is outside or maybe it's very hot outside. But generally, I love sunsets. Sunsets are just beautiful. The colors, sometimes the drama. A sunset can have this immense drama that is projected there. So, my views of art. So this has nothing to do with it's a different type of aesthetic experience. It's not an artistic experience. It's just an experience of beautiful colors and beautiful combinations of elements within nature. I travel a lot all over the world. I've often commented on just how magnificent, for example, New Zealand is. And how amazing the mountains there are, and the lakes and the glaciers, and just the natural beauty there is stunning. I'm being told that Norway is very similar to that. I've been to Norway, but haven't spent a lot of time there. Bergen is beautiful. I love the Yellow Mountains in China. I love the Rocky Mountains. I just went hiking and a little bit of hiking in the Rocky Mountains in the summer, and it's beautiful there. So absolutely. I mean, I see beauty everywhere. I mean, I also see some ugliness in places, but I see beauty everywhere. And the natural world is, there's a lot of beauty in the natural world, or much of the natural world is beautiful. There's a symmetry to it. There's a striving towards life to it. And there is a certain drama to it all. So, and there's nothing in objectivism that rejects it. It is true that, it's not the same kind of responses you have, I think, to a great work of art, to a romantic work of art. And I don't think it's the same kind of responses you have even to, the New York, or in some cases, the Shanghai skyline, which are so different, right? So, I mean, why limit yourself to any kind of, to finding beauty? You want to find beauty in as many places as possible, and you want to be able to enjoy as much of that beauty as possible. All right. I mean, wow. I mean, suddenly the questions are just flowing in, and the dollars are flowing in. So thank you guys. Really, really appreciate it. Wes says, I'm living well in this world and am no genius. Yes, there's so many opportunities to live well in this world. There's so many fun things to do in the world. There's so much access. I mean, the internet has provided us with this. The whole world has opened up to us. I mean, the whole aesthetic world has opened up. Art has opened up. Music, this thing, and your ability to access every piece of music ever produced, ever recorded, at a marginal cost of zero. Your ability to communicate with people across the world. It's so cheap today to travel. Get on a plane, go to Europe, take trains around Europe, go see beautiful places, go experience Michelangelo's David. I mean, never in human history is there been a better time to actually go out there and enjoy life. Basically, your material well-being is, if you have a job and you have a decent job, is taken care of. If you don't live in a super expensive city And if you do and you're not making enough money, move to a less expensive city, then, you know, there's so many things that are so damn cheap that you can enjoy. Think about how much money, I did this on the show a few days ago, how much money we used to have to spend just to feed ourselves or to clothe ourselves. And that is so much cheaper today. Cheaper in terms of the amount of time you have to devote to work in order to achieve those ends. So there's never been a better time than right now to go out there and live a great life. And look, any kind of other perspective on this is also, it's like you live right now. You got to make it a great life right now. But, you know, we've got to shake out of this pessimism. I try on this show to inspire you and to show you that doom and gloom is not really as dooming, as gloomy as maybe a lot of people think, and to try to, you know, maybe I need to do more of the Yaron's Rules for Life and go back to doing some Yaron's Rules for Life, but take control of what you have control over. You have control over most of your time. You have control over much of your life. You have control over much of your immediate environment. Make those amazing. Make them amazing. And you can do that. You're not limited in doing that for money. It's not about money. It's about choices. It's about priorities. It's not about money. Most of us, most of us make enough money to do it. All right. Let's see. Frank says, isn't the problem of economics reconciling conflicting views? Mises said consumers rule. Say said the market rules. And Ayn Rand said the producers rule. Isn't economics almost closer to an art form because all these views have merit? Well, they don't all have merit because not everybody rules. And say actually, you know, each element, consumers, markets, and producers, each have a role. And in a sense, none of them rule, right? But each one of them have a role, and economics is the science of understanding what that role is and what the relevant impact they have under any given set of circumstances. The challenge with economics is that it involves human decisions. It involves human free will. That's why it's so difficult. It involves people making decisions in the marketplace, both producers and consumers, entrepreneurs, employees, all making decisions in the marketplace. And all those decisions matter, but how they aggregate to an economy and what impact they have on the economy, kind of the broad scope of the economy, is impossible to aggregate. It's impossible to fully understand. That's the complexity. The complexity is the free will that people have. Will the auto workers next week go on strike or not? I don't know. There are people that are going to make choices about this. And whether they go on strike or not will have important implications on the economy, particularly certain regional economies. The actors' strike is having, actors and writers' strike in Hollywood, is having an impact on the economy, certainly on regional economies. And those are choices people are making. How they get resolved will make a difference to how the economy functions and how the economy does as we move into the rest of the year and into the years to come. Whether you decide that your future looks good economically and therefore it's okay for you to buy stuff right now, or whether you say, I'm going to hold up, I'm going to wait, I'm going to put it in a saving account, or maybe in a stock market, and that decision is going to impact things. And how Producers decide whether they're going to invest in new products and which ones, and what politicians do. There are too many variables to make accurate predictions. Too many variables, and the variables all have to do with people's free will. Now, you can aggregate it and view people as consumers, producers, but that doesn't help you, because the aggregate is just the sum of the choices individuals make. And it doesn't, there's no mean choice, there's no average choice, they're the choices. And they all have implications. So anything on a scale like that it's hard enough for a business person to predict in that particular business, in that particular line, what's going to happen next year in terms of demand, in terms of supply, in terms of where you should invest and what you should do. Never mind to do this and integrate this across the entire economy. So Mises and Say, who are economists, Rand was not an economist, Mises and Say, who are economists, what they can do is give us some principles to look at in terms of long-term consequences and in terms of what things impact and how they impact. And they'll always say, if this happens, all things are equal, something else will happen. But one of the things I like about Mises and the Austrian economists is they understand that economics is a constant dynamic process. And if something happens, there are counter actions. If the government makes a certain choice, financial markets can respond, and that response can nullify the impact of this particular choice. And then consumers or shareholders or bondholders or whatever, they're all interacting constantly, and it's a constantly moving target. It never stops. There's no equilibrium. It never settles. It's always moving. And to actually place a target on that movement, I think is almost impossible in terms of timing it. Again, you can generally say, if the government floods the market with money, there's gonna be inflation. Exactly when, which prices go up and which don't, how long it lasts, what the response, how the market will respond to the response to it, all of that. So there's certain things you can predict in generalities, but not in the specifics of it, because it all depends on how people respond. It all depends on individual free will. And people don't just respond based on incentives or based on stimuli. The response is a chosen response. There's free will. People have a complex sets of values, complex sets of considerations that they base their responses on. All right, let's see. We got a few $20 questions. We got a few $5 questions. Please, if you consider asking a question, $20 question would be great. We still got quite a bit of ground to cover to get to our goal. Thomas, at this point, 2023, after January 6th, with everything that is known, how are there people who are still undecided about voting against Trump? By now, either you like him or hate him. How could there still be people unsure? I don't see how they cannot be. I mean, you're assuming people are thinking, considering, applying the facts and making a decision. And given the facts, you should be clearly against Trump. And if you're evading, you're for Trump. But if you're not against Trump, if you're not, clear that you're going to vote against Trump, let's say in the primaries, put aside the general election, the primaries, there's still a lot of options of everything else. It's not, people don't have just 0 ones. If I don't like Trump, then I hate Trump. People might think, well, January 16th, yeah, it was bad. But you know what? Biden's bad too. And other things have happened that's bad. And Trump might be the only guy who can beat Biden. Maybe not. Maybe yes. I don't know. Depends on the poll. And Trump seems to be, all the Republicans are supporting Trump. So should I not support him? Everybody else supports him. I mean, there's so many different ways in which people think about this stuff. It's not like it's not like a trial. We look at all the facts and there's a verdict. People don't function that way. People don't judge. They don't like judging. Oh, I don't want to judge. I don't want to have a strong opinion about this. I'm just going to see what happens. Roll with it. So, no, I really don't think it's just it's just this or that. There are lots of people who are unsure. Why are they unsure? Because they're not thinking. Because they're only thinking a little bit. Because they evading certain facts. Because they're second-handed and they're trying to see where the crowd is going. Because of a million different. Irrationality has unlimited possibilities. Andrew, AI has a deep, insightful video on Rand's criticism of original sin. It's an attack on being, qua being. Why do you think man accepted it or still accepts it? I don't know. I think people accept it because psychologically it reinforces or it seems to explain their fallibility. It seems to explain why they're not successful at everything they do. It explains why they can make mistakes. It's a way not to take full responsibility over what you're doing. It's a way to shed responsibility. It's a way to, say, well, what I'm flawed. We're all flawed. Of course, bad stuff happens. So I think that's a big part of it. I think that this idea of being inherently flawed is a way out for people. It's a way out to justify and explain away their misgivings. Maybe at some level it's also a way to explain evil in the world, right? There is evil in the world. In spite of God's existence, in spite of everything, there are really, really evil people out there. How can they be evil people out there? How can people who seemingly are good turn around and turn into evil people, as we know they can? One explanation of that is we all have evil within us. We all have the capacity for evil. And of course, the real meaning of original sin is the hatred of being per being. So here's another way of thinking of it. I mean, it's so rooted in our mythology, the Judeo-Christian mythology, and Christianity takes it more seriously than Judaism. But it's the Garden of Eden again, right? We were pure. We were happy and pure and content and integrated into nature and beautiful and amazing and free and all these amazing things. And then we disobeyed God, by basically striving to know, striving to be a little bit like Him. And that's it. And that is the origin of all our sins. But if you think about what that origin is our reason. That origin is our will, our mind, our free will. That is the origin of all sin. That's the original sin. The original sin is thinking. And in that sense, there's a certain, it's like at some point evolutionarily, we went from being animals to being human. And of course, the difference is free will. But free will is not automatic. That's the point, right? So you have to make an effort to go for free will. And some people don't make that effort. And they stay at the kind of animalistic state. And one way to explain what's going on is to say, well, the animalistic state is the pure state. I think this is also Rousseau, right? state of nature, right? It's a nihilistic state. That's when we're pure. That's when we are at our best. That's when and when we engage in reason, we engage in the fall. We engage in anti-nature. We engage in anti the animal, which is the pure. And that's the origin of all that's wrong, all the problems in the world. I don't even know if I answered the question. You'll have to tell me, Andrew, if I answered that. Anyway, a lot of interesting things there. And yeah, I'm curious about kind of the history of original sin within Christianity and how it evolved. I mean, almost all the doctrines that we know today as Christian doctrines are doctrines that evolved, changed, were argued about, were rejected, were accepted, were people killed each other over them, it's truly amazing. And I'd be curious about the concept of original sin and how that plays out. Maybe I'll look for a book on that, because that would be interesting. How did that concept evolve over time, and in what way? Right. Lewis asked, how would you respond to someone saying, how can Ayn Rand know what is in everyone's own rational interest? Well, because once you know the nature of a thing, once you understand the nature of a thing, then you know how it will act on principle. So if you understand the nature of, gravity, then you know that every time on Earth, on planet Earth at least, every time you let go of an object, it will go down. It will go towards the Earth. How do you know it will happen every time? Because you understand the nature of the thing that is dropping and the nature of gravity, the reality of it. Once you understand the nature of a plant, you know that watering it will allow it to grow. That not watering it at all, ever, will probably kill it. That watering it too much will probably kill it. You know that if you put a plant in soil, it will grow roots. You know that most plants, if you put them somewhere, will grow towards the sun. I mean, once you understand the nature of the thing, you can determine how it will respond and how it will act and what will happen to it. Well, what Ayn Rand is doing is she's understanding or learning or figuring out the nature of man. The nature of man is that he has free will. The nature of man is that he does not survive by his instincts. The nature of man is that he faces death. The nature of man is that the way he overcomes death is not by instinct, but by reason, by thinking. That's his nature. So if morality are the set of values that lead to life, then reason has to be your prime value. Rationality, or rationality, your prime virtue. Because that's the nature of the beast, the nature of the human animal. That's how he survives. So she knows this by evaluating the nature of human beings, by knowing what's good for human being and bad for humans, just like we learn what's good for a plant and what's bad for a plant. What's good and bad for a plant is not whatever you feel like. So, yeah, I mean, that's a really, really, really important question. And it's really, really important to understand that what you'd call the meta-ethics, Ayn Rand's meta-ethics, and how she gets to the virtues and values and how she approaches it. And she approaches it from the perspective, what is man? And what does man need in order to survive? Those are the fundamental questions. Right. Adam asks, Ukraine was set to disable Russian fleet blockading Ukraine grain exports. Elon Musk turned off Starlink access for the Ukraine system that needed access to carry this out. What is your judgment? How should one act? I mean, there are two things. One is I just want to correct from what I understand, is an error there. It wasn't that he turned it off, it's that he didn't turn it on. That is, Starlink was available, was available, on Ukraine. It had not been turned on. It did not have access to Crimea. And what Ukraine asked him was to turn it on so they could have this operation in Crimea. And he refused to turn it on. So maybe that's a nuance difference, but it is a real difference, right? It wasn't that he actively went out there and subverted the operations. He just said, no, I'm not supplying this service for you. Now this is the whole thing is a tricky issue. Because on the one hand, you have to say, look, Starlink is a private operation by a private individual. It's a private company. They have every right, political right, to provide services or not to provide services to anybody they decide to provide or not provide those services under any conditions. And that would be absolutely true. I mean, Ukraine is using the services of a private company, and it has to function under the terms of service of that company. And I don't know what the terms of service that Ukraine has accepted. I mean, some of them must be that Elon Musk has the right to decide where they can use Starlink and where they can't, or which Starlink's turned on for them and which don't. So he has every right in that sense to do this. It's a little, I've been thinking about this the last few days, and I'm not sure what my position is yet. It's something I have to think about. It is interesting, though, because there are real foreign policy implications here. So the American government should have an interest here, should have a stake. But it's tricky because Starlink in and of itself is not a military product. So, for example, the United States government has to give its permission for a weapons manufacturer to sell weapons to a particular country. And I think that's completely right. You cannot sell, for example, weapons in a way that would undermine and contradict the foreign policy of the United States government. Government is responsible for foreign policy, and you can't undermine it. But now we're talking about technologies, and here, chips, Starlink, other things that are not weapons, but that have implications with regard to weapons and have implications with regard to foreign policy. To what extent can the government get involved in these things? Restricting chip sales to China, telling Musk that he has to provide Starlink to Ukraine. Can you do that to a private company? He has to provide it. Has to provide it to allow them to do whatever they want, independent of what Elon Musk's views are. Anyway, I think that's a complex question, and I don't yet have a definitive answer about that. Now, in terms of the moral issue, I mean, what a coward Elon Musk is. I mean, this is cowardice. Elon Musk has already, in many ways, expressed his fear of Russia. He's already expressed his interest in appeasing the Russians. He's already proposed ludicrous peace deals where, the Russians get to keep much of these territories. So when it comes to Elon Musk's understanding of foreign policy, understanding of the Ukrainian-Russian war, understanding of geopolitics, I mean, he's got a similar understanding to Vivek, and it's very, 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 superficial, fear-based, and way too respectful, way too sympathetic to the thug, the authoritarian thug that is Putin. So I find it despicable what he did. Again, he probably is within his rights, but I find it despicable, morally despicable what he did. And sad, because we could be a lot further along. Ukraine could be a lot further along in pushing the Russians out of Ukrainian territory than it is today if Elon Musk had allowed them to do what they wanted to do. So there are a lot of questions here. Morally, it's clear to me what the answer is. But politically, and it's not obvious to me how all this connects. It's something to keep thinking about. And the modern world is very different because weapons used to be weapons, and that was it. And there was a much clearer line between what was weapon and what was a commercial product, non-threatening, not geopolitical, just product. And now that difference has been blurred. So a whole area of foreign policy and strategy to think about. But there's no World War III. I mean, what is this craziness about World War III? Where is there World War III? Why would there be a World War III? I mean, Russia has no interest in a World War III right now. It is not in a position to fight a World War III. If it used nukes, it would be wiped out. It would literally be wiped out. There would be no Russia. Now, maybe there would be no world, but is Putin really interested and willing? Is generals really interested and willing to destroy the world and destroy themselves in the process? I mean, what is the fear here? I mean, imagine if JFK had feared the Russians the way all these right-wingers do, including Musk. What is the risk here? Escalation. Oh, we don't want to escalate. Escalate to what? To Putin attacking with conventional weapons NATO? He'd be wiped out. I mean, in days. Using nukes? I mean, that would be insanity for him to use nukes. Even he is not that crazy. So what are we worried about? What is this World War III that is just around the corner? Yeah, I mean, Putin mentions nuclear war periodically. Do we believe him? Are we going to be intimidated? If he invades America, are we not going to attack back because we're afraid of nuclear war? What is the issue? I mean, you either stand up to a bully or you don't stand up to a bully. And if you don't, you know exactly what's going to happen. Now, Iran, nuclear weapons is much more dangerous because Iranians are potentially much more suicidal because they're religious fanatics. The same would be true of Pakistan if the bombs in Pakistan fall into the wrong hands. But I'm not that worried about Russia. I'm not even that worried about North Korea. I would be much more aggressive towards North Korea because he'd be crushed. Yeah, he'd inflict a lot of damage, but he'd be crushed, he'd be dead, he'd be finished. Putin is not nuts. Nobody thinks that Putin is nuts. Nobody thinks Putin is that nuts. Nobody thinks Putin is suicidal. Putin shows every indication he is not suicidal, that he will fight for his existence. But no, Putin is immoral, he's a brute, he's a gangster, but gangsters are not suicidal. Not in the sense that they do things on purpose where they know they're going to die. They might miscalculate, like he's miscalculated, but using nukes, I mean, that is, and it's not just Putin. There's a whole chain of command that would have to agree to the nukes. They would have to agree to commit suicide for the entire Russian people, including their families. So, and let's say Putin's nuts. If Putin is truly nuts, then the right U.S. strategy should be to assassinate him as quickly as possible. It should be urgent to assassinate him. Because are we going to live for the rest of our lives in fear of nutty Putin pressing the button and killing us all? Kill him quickly. Get rid of him as fast as possible. But that's not what they're advocating. They're advocating appeasing a crazy person. How does appeasing a crazy person who's got his finger on the nukes, how does that work? How does that gain you anything? I mean, it is literally insanity the way Musk, Jordan Peterson, and the rest of them think about Russia. All right, Frank. The concept of value unites a perception with a purpose. Is politics of unclear value because it offers an abundance of perception to win votes with unclear arbitrary purpose or ends? Tyranny, the logic of propaganda. God, there's a lot there. I don't know why politics is unclear, why it's an unclear value. It's very clear the value of politics. But the issue is, what is the right politics? And, you know, the right politics is not a politics of winning votes. The right politics is a politics of defending rights. So I don't know what's unclear, what the unclear value is, and I'm not sure what you mean unites a perception with a purpose. What's the perception? The purpose is to gain the value. It's to gain the thing that you are seeking. You know, reason. Yeah, I mean, I'd have to think about that more deeply in terms of that. It's not how I think of value, and I'm not sure what you mean by abundance of perception. What does that even mean? And why is it an arbitrary purpose or end? Why does it have to be? It could be, but why does it have to be? It's not clear to me that it has to be. All right, Clark. How is Ayn Rand so sure about people's psychological motives? How does she know certain segments of society are motivated by envy or nihilism? She probably never experienced envious, nihilistic, or evasive psychological states in her life. I think she looks around and she perceives it in others. And being a novelist, being an artist, I think one of the things she is very good at, and all artists, good artists, are very good at, is understanding the logic of certain psychological states, if you will. The logic of envy, the logic of nihilism, the logic of an evasive psychology, and what that leads to, and how that manifests itself. And particularly when you see people, so see, most of us interact with people, and we just interact with them. And I think for Ayn Rand, she interacted with people, she categorized them as certain types, engaged in certain behaviors. You know, and she saw certain consistencies. So I think what makes Ayn Rand unique is this combination of philosopher and novelist. So somebody who is a genius philosopher with these deep psychological insights. And that's what makes Rand unique, and that's what makes it possible for her to do this. All of her experiences with people were categorized and used then to write her novels, used then to create the characters in her novels, and to have them play out certain situations. And then, induced from that are certain principles of behavior, certain attitudes of behavior, and what certain behavior leads to. And while she didn't directly experience these, she experienced it through her observation of other people and through her, if you will, thought experiments, and those thought experiments manifested themselves in her novels. Hopefully that answers the question, Clark. It's a good question. I hope I did it justice. All right. Wow, we've made quite a dent in our goal. So we're just $162 short of the goal. We're coming on in 2 hours. Let's just do $20 questions from now on. We've got a bunch still of $5 questions, but I don't want to go too long. So let's do $20 questions. And if we're going to go longer, I definitely want to try to reach the goal. So 6 $20 questions, or actually, I can't do math anymore. 8 $20 questions will actually get us to our goal, and that would be terrific if we got 8 $20 questions or 3 $50 questions or something like that to get us very close to the goal, or maybe even exceed the goal. That would be amazing. All right, Mark says, what can be done to encourage proper positive economics on money and other issues that can counter the Keynesian nonsense that is mainstream? What can be done? I mean, what we need to do is promote kind of Austrian economics, to promote free markets, to promote economics that looks at human action, that looks at how human beings interact, how markets work, to promote good economics. And to show, indeed, that most of our problems, most of our challenges in economics, or economic challenges, are caused by the Keynesian nonsense, right? The Keynesian approach. Or and a lot of it's not even Keynesian, a lot of it's just mathematical modeling that, maybe is a little Keynesian, maybe a little other things, but a lot of it's just statistics but understanding that economics is really about human choices, human decision-making, individual human decision-making. That's the challenge. That's what we need to explain to people, educate people about. Apollo Zeus, please read and review Megan's book. I know. You keep making me feel guilty. Harper says, do you find people often disappoint you? How do you bounce back from it spiritually? Yeah, people definitely people disappoint. How do you bounce back? You can't, I don't know. It's a reality that people disappoint, that people can go bad, that people are never as good as, often not as good as you think they are. That is something you just have to recognize and internalize. So then somebody disappoints, somebody disappointed. They made bad choices. They did bad things. And you go on. I mean, not everybody disappoints, right? There's some people who don't. And that's the focus on the people who don't. The focus on the good people. A lot of my approach to it is, what do I learn from it? About people, what do I learn from it not to have it happen? What do I learn from it because almost everybody disappoints you. There are warning signs in advance that they're going to disappoint you. So how to pay attention to those warning signs, how to take them more seriously, how to operationalize those warning signs. That's, I think, the biggest challenge. And so you want to turn it into a learning opportunity, a growing opportunity. The fact that they disappoint at the end of the day is their problem, not yours. They are the issue, not you. Liam says, have you seen The Mummy and The Mummy Returns? What did you think of these films? God, I think I saw The Mummy. It's an action movie. I don't know. I don't particularly like movies like that. too random and arbitrary action without really big points. I don't think there was a lot of point. I think it was fun, if I remember right, but I wouldn't see it again. Wouldn't go out of my way to see it. I want to see Equalizer 3. I liked Equalizer 1 and Equalizer 2. Denzel Washington is one of my favorite actors, certainly in modern times, one of my favorites. And I like the first two, that strong sense of justice, that unbelievable efficaciousness, and dedication to justice. I like movies that emphasize that. Maybe I'll go see Equalizer 3 tomorrow. That'll be fun. Mark says, a show on Sumerian roots of Judeo-Christian faith. God, I don't know if I could do a show on that. I don't know that I know enough about the Sumerian roots of Judeo-Christian faith. I'm not sure I know, and I'm not sure I'm that interested or will ever know. I'm much more interested about the evolution of Christianity. What interests me is how do we go is the period from Rome to the founding of America. And particularly the lead up to the Renaissance. I'm learning a lot from this book on Christendom on what was going on in Europe in like the 11th and 12th centuries that ultimately led to a Renaissance, that ultimately led to an Enlightenment. That's what interests me. The role of ideas and how they shape things. But it's not just ideas, it's the role of human interaction, human decisions, human choices, how they interact with ideas to shape the particular path history has taken. That is fascinating. But I'm more interested in post-Rome. Not even that interested in the ancient world. I'm more interested in what led to the amazing world we live in today. Amazingly good, I would add. Andrew says, I get the sense Musk and others on the right are not on Russia's side per se, but almost protective of Russia, that is not being treated unfairly by the West. Is that egalitarianism or other thoughts on the attitude? Oh, no. I mean, it depends who. I don't really know Musk. Musk's where he's coming from. I just think Musk is influenced by people like Jordan Peterson. I just think that's where he gets his stuff from. And so I think that their view is, who cares about Ukraine? Ukraine's a nothing. It's insignificant to them and to America. Russia is Christian, and explicitly Christian, which is good. They view that good. Again, I don't know about Musk. This is more Jordan Peterson. Russia is strong and powerful. And Putin is a strong and powerful guy. He's a guy's guy. He's very masculine. They like that. And it's impossible for them, and they don't really imagine that he could be motivated by empire or mysticism or grandeur. It must be the West's fault, because the West sucks. So here's a big part of what motivates them. What motivates them is Ukraine is loved by the West. The West is dominated by the left. The left sucks. Anybody fighting the left, therefore anybody fighting Ukraine, must be decent, or at least good, or at least not the enemy. So much of what shapes their approach to the conflict, to any conflict, is who's aligned. And where is the left? Where's my enemy? And so that's one. Second is, they think because Putin's a man's man, he represents these manly virtues, that he's somebody to be feared and respected. Well, I think he's not to be feared and to be spat on. He's a nothing and a nobody in any meaningful sense. And again, if he's really crazy, if we really fear he would launch nuclear attack on us, we should kill him as quickly as possible. But that's unthinkable. But to them, he's a bit of like a heroic character. He's standing up to the West. He's standing up to the West. How cool is that? Finally, somebody standing up. I mean, it's what they love about Trump. He stands up to the left. It doesn't mean anything. But that's what they want. They want action. They want men of action. It doesn't add up to anything, doesn't mean anything. They want people who challenge the status quo, who stand up to evil. Oh, of course, Musk knows Jordan Peterson. You can see Jordan Peterson's influence on Musk significantly. They in the same circles. Jordan Peterson is in certain circles in Austin, Texas. That Elon Musk is in those same circles. Of course, they know each other. It's a very small world, and these are very, very tight circles. So there's no question they know each other. How well, I don't know. But again, the intellectual influence travels. It doesn't have to travel directly from Jordan Peterson to Elon Musk. It could travel through intermediaries who are influenced by Jordan Peterson and who influence Musk. Maybe, what's his name? This guy, this venture capitalist who's always on Twitter defending Musk, with a Jewish name. I forget his name. It could be that guy. There are a number of people on Twitter who are clearly close to Musk, constantly defend Musk, and obviously in the same kind of intellectual circle as people like Jordan Peterson. Frank says, isn't politics as the logic of state survival in asymmetric relationship with individual prosperity as freedom and rights, and therefore ultimately willing to sacrifice freedom for tyranny? Well, no, because that's a wrong conceptualization of politics. It's the conventional conceptualization of politics. It's the dominant perception of politics, but it's not the right perception of politics. Politics is the field that studies the role of government, and in that sense, the purpose of politics, the purpose of government is not state survival. It's the protection of the individuals in the state. The state, in that sense, is not an end. It's a means. And politics is not an end. Politics is a means. Politics and the state are means towards the end of human flourishing, individual human flourishing. And therefore, the state and politics should be dedicated to that which leads to individual human flourishing, which means freedom and rights. So, the logic of the state, the purpose of politics, the purpose of the state is not to survive qua state. The purpose of the state is to provide the environment in which individuals can flourish. And then we need to think about what that environment looks like. And if it doesn't do that, then the state should end. That's how the Declaration of Independence is written. James says, recently insurance companies are bailing on certain states or increasing premiums by more than 20%. How does one rationalize staying in a place they cannot afford in the future, since they can barely afford it now? I'm not sure who you're talking about. You're talking about individuals who can't afford the insurance anymore. Don't stay. I mean, leave. You need to think about where you want to live. Part of the considerations are the cost of living, and part of the inputs into the cost of living is the cost of insurance. So all of that plays a role. Now, the reason insurance companies are leaving, the reason they're bailing on certain states, is primarily because of regulations and state competition. Insurance companies bailed in California in terms of earthquake insurance, not because the probability of earthquakes went up. It hasn't changed. The probabilities are the same. But because the state stepped in and provides its own earthquake insurance. And because FEMA comes in after the crisis and makes everybody whole anyway, so they don't feel like they have to buy insurance. Why buy insurance when FEMA is going to show up and bail us all out? So all the incentive structures around insurance are distorted and perverted in America because of politics. And as a consequence, insurance companies are leaving. It's not because of any particular thing that's objective thing that's happening in the world. It's because of the objective threat that state governments pose vis-a-vis the insurance companies. But yes, in terms of your life, if insurance premiums have gone up and the cost of living has gone up, and you can no longer save money or you can no longer afford to live in a place, then move. There are plenty of places that still have low insurance rates that are not close to hurricanes or earthquakes or tornadoes, or find a place that's relatively cheap to live in. I mean, part of my point about you can make a good life for yourself is because if you live in America, you live in a very big country with lots of opportunities, and you can make choices about where to live and what opportunities to take advantage of. James says, I have a few 100-hour work weeks in front of me. How do you stay pumped when you're working long hours and traveling? I love what I do, just looking to see a different way to be excited for the long hours ahead. I mean, you love what you do, so, and you know that this is something you have to do. This is something that's necessary for you to do. I think, you've got to internalize the value that you are gaining from the 100 hours of work. You've got a certain quality of life. You've got a certain standard of living. You're enjoying what you're doing. When you're on the road, even though you're working hard, you're enjoying meeting new people, visiting new cities, whatever it is that you do. You've got to just focus and orient yourself around the values, around the positives, around the good, around what you get out of it, and not dwell on the difficulty. And look, you're gonna get over it, right? You've done this before. You know what you're doing, and you know how to do it. Like I'm, in October I've got this long trip. But I've done long trips many times. I know what I pack. I know how to pack. I know how to travel. I know how to get around. There's not much. Oh, what I do, that's what I do. I focus on the positives. I'm excited about going to new places. I'm excited about the people I'm going to meet. I'm excited about the work I'm going to do there, the things I'm going to do. I like the variety that travel, for example, and lots of work provides us. I like the satisfaction of doing, of learning, of engaging. So I motivate myself through my own personal values. What is it that I enjoy about activity X? And that's what I focus on. I don't focus on the hardship. I don't focus on difficulty. And I'm also confident that all of it can be done. It won't break me. I know that. So that's me. I also try to sprinkle in whatever crazy hours and long hours you're working with fun stuff. Like I'll be in Europe, so stick in a couple of really, really good restaurants, or a nice concert, or something really that's enjoyable and fun and interesting. That it's not just dominated by the work, by a certain type of expenditure of energy. Apollo says, how much of Ayn Rand's scientific knowledge is now obsolete, and what are the implications philosophically? I don't believe any of it. I think a lot of it is, not a lot of it. I think chunks of it are obsolete. Although one has to say that in terms of real scientific knowledge and discovery, have there been that many breakthroughs since she died? I don't think so. But certainly some fields are more some fields are much more developed, but so a lot of it, some of it is obsolete. I don't know that much of it is wrong, but some of it is just much more developed and much more real. I don't think that has any implications philosophically. None of it has changed the nature of man. None of it has changed or challenged the nature of reality. None of it has changed the basic laws of metaphysics. I don't see what would challenge any of our philosophical stance. All right, last question. We're done pretty well, but we're still short about $77. But I really appreciate it. A lot of you stepped up with $20 questions. A few of you with 50, like Clark and Frank and Wes. And of course, John did $100 way earlier. So thank you for that. But we're still about 77 short. 89 people on now. You could do it without questions. You could just do some stickers. We could probably easily make it, but I'll leave that up to you. If you want to help make the target, if you want to help support the Yaron Brook Show, go for it. Value for value. All right, James says, last question. Are there some people, or at least the question asked so far, are there some people you have no idea how they possibly became so successful in business? Wow. Sure, there are quite a few of those, sadly. Some people that I know personally who, God, I don't know how they did it. They're not that good at anything. The people I know from a distance who are more schmoozes, and they're just not what I consider good business people, and yet somehow they have succeeded. There are. It's hard to, it's hard to get examples in terms of names right now, but there certainly are people like that I don't know how they did it, because they fooled a lot of people along the way, I think. Apollo Zeus says he asked Harry the question as well. And what was Harry's answer? I assume it was the same as mine, because we all think alike, right? I have no idea. No, I don't know about Mark Cuban. I mean, certainly Mark Cuban, I think, lucked out, not so much because he built a business. He built a real business. He had a good idea. The lucky part was that he sold the business and then he immediately cashed out just before the dot-com bubble burst. So he in a sense got lucky by selling at the peak and getting out. Most of the people who sold at the peak didn't get out. They stayed in the stock and then it plummeted. He got out and then he invested pretty well. He invested in the Dallas Mavericks. That turned out to be a great investment, but I think he's invested in other things that have done well. So I don't consider Mark Cuban to be, somewhat lucky, but he might have been successful anyway. All right. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate the support. I appreciate all the super chatters. Let's see. Yes, no show tomorrow, although I am releasing a video of something. I can't remember what it is, but I am releasing a video, premiering a video tomorrow. We will have a show on Monday morning, back to the regular schedule. I will note, I'm still looking for people who would like to participate in a public speaking workshop in London, October 18th. London, October 18th, public speaking workshop. Small, just a handful of people. A lot of attention. The whole day, full day. It'll be middle of the week, but it'll be a whole day where we really focus in on getting you to become the best public speaker you can be. So, still looking for people interested in that. It'll be something around, I don't know, $750 to $1,000 per person for the day. So take that into account. But if there are people out there who are interested, and let me know. Drop me an email, Yaron@YaronBrookShow.com. at yaronbrookshow.com. All right, guys, have a great rest of your weekend. I will see you all on